Hello there. Good to be here in the UK. And, this occasion is to commemorate a teaching, a Darwin approach, and the story of the teaching, which is the book, in Jeweled Path, and also the author of the book, Karen Johnson, who will be talking to you shortly. So I'll talk a little bit first. And I will say one important thing to say is that even though the teaching is usually associated with my name because of all the books, some even in Europe, they call it Dalma's work, it wouldn't be the way it is without Karen's and her input in it. It's true at the beginning, as it started, I was teaching it and having experiences and insights and working with groups and but I was a friend with Karen right from the beginning. We were friends. She was present there with the teaching, and she got involved fast. And so as the teaching was developing, we were discussing things together, and she's participating. And after a while, we got joined by a third friend, Faisal. So it was a triad. We were having discussions, and although most of the experiences inside were coming from me, they were contributing their own experiences inside, which I used all of them, plus the experiences of students, to make a synthesis that became what we call a teaching. But at some point, Faisal left, so Karen and me were carrying on the teaching. So our relationship developed even deeper, stronger, and because our conversation, which were more on a kind of a Sufi Socratic way. Sufi means munajat or sohbat. Socratic means inquiry, which is the company of the wise. And from that, and Karen's contribution increased further and further, so the teaching now, the way it now is not just Almas's teaching, Darwin approach, and Karen has a great contribution she made to it. And one of the biggest contributions, she wrote this book, which tells actually the story of the teaching from the inside, not from somebody observing from the outside, but she's from the inside, from the inside the alchemical lab where the teaching was being cooked. She was one of the cooks. So I'll introduce her now, Karen, for her to tell you about the book and herself and the teaching.
Hi. So good to be here. Exciting. Actually, I don't consider myself one of the cooks. I consider myself to be cooked. And how I'd like to begin this evening is with just some moments of silence to settle in together, to become part of a blended atmosphere, to be in touch with yourself, and just take a moment. How many people here are actually not in the school and have no practice of any kind? Okay. For the few who are not in any kind of a spiritual path, I'd like you just to follow your breath, pay attention to your breathing, and the rest of you can choose a meditation that you do that helps you settle, land. Okay? So we'll start with the bell, and I'll end with the bell, and it'll be quite short. but timeless. Okay. So I often sit when I'm teaching, but I'm not going to teach tonight. I'm just going to talk to you, which might end up being interesting. You might learn something. But I didn't really come here to teach you anything, just like I didn't write this book to teach you anything. However, it has turned out to be a teaching, I'm told. People are learning a lot about the work that they hadn't heard before. I'm getting a little echoey. Is there something I need to do with? How's that? Better? Is that good? Okay, we'll get it right together. How's that? Still bad? Maybe a little. Kiss me, fool. Okay, how's that? About as good as we can get. How about if I bend it? How's that? Bend me. Okay. Better. Good. So, the diamond approach. Interesting name, isn't it? One day Hamid looked at me and he said, I thought of a name for it. I said, for what? He said, for what we're doing. I said, which part of what we're doing? Well, the whole thing. When we finally realized that it actually was a teaching, which was quite some years, actually. He said, what about the diamond approach? And I thought, what a strange name for a teaching. A path. And then he went on to say, well, that's what it is, isn't it? And I thought about it, and I thought, yeah, actually, that's exactly what it is. It's an approach to experience. It's an approach to how to look in to yourself, how to navigate the inner world, how to venture inward in a precise, clear way that brings about refracted illumination. And so, in our work together, it became more and more obvious that this was the perfect name. Not a clumsy name, not a weird name, but actually a descriptive word, or two words. Speaking of words, this book is spelled with one L. I actually misspelled it when I named it, which had two L's. When I came to the UK, I realized I was spelling it correctly. Because that's one of my difficulties. I can't spell. Even my spell check on my computer doesn't know what I'm saying half the time. So this is the purpose we're here this evening, is really to celebrate and discuss this book, which has been quite a jewel and a teaching for me. When I set out to chronicle the teachings, that's really what I was doing, is chronicling things, writing things down that were how things occurred so that years from now, people couldn't just go with the mythology that always develops out of gossip, basically. Who knows what really occurred with some of the other traditions? We hear stories about it, but we haven't heard from Buddha's mouth, from Jesus' mouth, from many of these other greats, and we're not putting ourselves up with them. But the teaching itself, as it's coming through, is clearly a living teaching that will outlive us. And it's going to bring about its own emissaries. It will bring about and choose its own vessels who will continue the teaching. And we just feel we are the first of those vessels. Not the only vessels. When Hamid set out to train teachers, I'll never forget the look on his face. He said, this is a living teaching. And to really reach people, we need to be able to have many mouths, many expressions, because this teaching moves through people differently, beautifully, and the articulation hits different notes, different tones. So he created a symphony of teachers that together, when we work together, we work things out, we learn from each other, and we begin to harmonize just like we teach our groups to do. And that is the beauty, I think, of this work. is there isn't one teacher. There are many exemplars of what's possible. And that's another reason that I wrote this book. I wanted to take the mystery out of it and show you how, in fact, a big golden placket did not fall on Hamid's head. And then he just started reading it, right? And diamonds didn't just come from the sky, swallow them, and boink, all of a sudden we're shining and glowing in bliss. We worked every aspect of it, that it really was pushing through. We were pushed, pummeled, ground up and cooked. And I wanted to show that our humanness is real. We know the kind of suffering that many of you feel. We don't know every kind of suffering that you feel. Everyone actually has their very own brand. Your very own suffering, which is the beauty of this work and how the book describes the process. I decided somewhere along the line I was going to just show you what happened. I thought, you need to see that we went through it. You need to see that we digested these things too. We did have some very important blessings along the way. And some of those blessings let us follow the stream a little more easily. Trust that going off the waterfall, we'd end up in some kind of pool that would catch us, or maybe shattered on the rocks, and that might be okay too. That kind of trust was there. But one thing I really wanted to say about being here in London is that I kind of traced the trail of how this work grew in such a beautiful, organic way. We never thought, okay, first it's Colorado, let's start here, and then we'll go to California. Oh, and then at some point we really have got to get to Europe. Didn't work like that. It had much more intelligence in it, and it brought about the response to the need. I feel that this work is a response to the needs of our time, to really learn about the value of an individual, to learn about how that individual has equal value to the transcendent and beyond. That the dual and the non-dual are two ways of dealing with things. This is the beauty, and I think it's timely. And this is not a discounting of all the other traditions. But there are ways in which different traditions really pop up at times. They're needed. And if we watch the way this work grew, it started out in a living room, and then it grew to another living room in Hamid's house in California. And then he began to train teachers. And in 1992, that almost sounds like a date of discovery. It was. Well, it is, where we discovered Europe. And the first Europe, it's like, hello, oh my God. There's a whole nother world out there. The Diamond Approach landed in Germany, where me and a few others ended up in Seefeld teaching the first Diamond Approach Europe group. Some years later, another group began, and that actually began the development of the Diamond Approach in Europe, where we had to encounter new culture. We had to begin to deal with different kinds of issues, because this work really does not just go into your personal culture, your family culture, but to really be free, we have to transcend all culture. It doesn't dismiss culture. They're each beautiful. and precious and interesting, and bring about different ways of looking at things. Every time you go to a new country that you've never been in before, you go, wow, this is a really interesting way to spice your food, treat your children, eat breakfast. Have you ever studied the kinds of breakfasts people eat all over the world? It's really interesting. And usually it's, oh my God, I can't imagine I would eat that for breakfast. But once you try it, you sort of get that it goes with the culture, right? One thing I love about being in this culture, and I'm learning about, I haven't been in it a lot, but I'm learning how much you really value mind in a certain way. That it's reflected even in the educational system here, where debate is encouraged, where speaking up and speaking your truth is encouraged. It's a socially sanctioned thing. And occasionally I'll turn on the TV and watch Parliament, and they'll be like, they make very interesting noises. And I'm going, you don't see that in the US. You just get golf claps like they're at some kind of a sports match or something, right? They're just clapping. Nobody says anything. In Britain, they're going, yeah, 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 or I mean, there's actually real opinions being spouted by the noises that are being made. It's really interesting. But I really have enjoyed meeting some of you and just the quality of mind you have and the way that that's valued, I appreciate. And that also speaks to the teacher that landed here, Sandra Maitri. I think she's probably teacher to most of you who are in groups, right? Who has such a refinement and a quality of mind and the clarity and just a lovely articulation of the teaching. And that, I think, is a really good fit. The teaching does not discount mind. There's a value of going beyond mind into the non-conceptual and completely being able to let go of mind. Very important. But for us, in the Diamond approach, that precision is a quality of mind. But that but is actually an and. For us, we use mind to go beyond mind. We use the probing, interested, curious desire to know, to even go beyond the subjective mind into a kind of knowing that's only possible when you really feel it, because that's what your heart wants to know. So what we do is we begin to couple up this mind and that scintillating precision that's possible. But it needs some kind of a astrolabe. It needs an orientation. And the heart's orientation is not through thought, it's through love. We can't help our heart love what it loves. It just loves what it loves. Pure and simple. You can't make it do differently. You can't try to make yourself love somebody. You can't. Have you ever tried to fall in love? I mean, like, try hard to fall in love with somebody. It doesn't work. It catches you unawares. You've got your laundry list. He's got to be like this and this and this. And the one you fall in love with, you look at the list and I don't care anymore. I'm out of control, right? The heart's language is love. When the heart and the mind start to communicate, that's when the inner journey actually gets a real orientation. And that's when true scientific investigation occurs, right? I hear you guys are very pragmatic, very interested in verification. Some of you. I'm hearing, the rocks are sliding back and forth. Some of you, yes. As a culture, as I understand it, there's a wish for verification. Think Newton or one of those scientific guys. The interesting thing about this work, too, is that Hamid has such a mind and such a heart that got him into science to begin with. I don't know if you know this about him. Some of you might have peeked in the book already. He was studying physics and really wanting to know the truth of what's around him, what this world is. At 12 years old, he said in some pithy moment, I don't know where this comes from a 12-year-old, meet the world head on and just let it in, or something like that. It was in Arabic, but it sounded beautiful, and that's been his orientation. The first way he met the world he wanted to know was meeting this world, taking it in, and developing his mind in such a way that it just became a probing instrument. And that probing instrument went as far as it could, nearly getting a PhD in physics. And then one day he's down at the cafeteria and he's looking at all the guys he's studying with, and all he saw were these brilliant minds walking around without any bodies. Like little stick figures down here in these full, glorious, brilliant minds. He says, help. I don't want to be like that. And then he started falling asleep every day he went to work. So that was kind of the end of that career. But he began to turn inward with the same probing interest. And that's really what's needed, is interest, curiosity. It's really a very self-respecting path. Any experience you have is interesting. I mean, the fact that we have experience at all is interesting. Who's having it? How does that happen? How's mine different from that person's? So he also would come up against these discoveries and then share them with me. And I easily opened to them. And then we began that conversation he was talking about, of talking about the discoveries and what they were, what they meant, what they brought up in us. And that brought out more questions, more interest. And then we couldn't stop ourselves. We wanted to talk about it all the time. And we did, every chance we got. And he began working with students, having a group. And that group was considered a work group, not a Diamond Approach group. The naming of Diamond Approach happened quite a bit down the road after this first event of a group developing. And he would begin to notice that through practicing presence, certain kinds of practices that he would bring in that would help us get into our bodies. Actually, he kicked me out of the first group. You'll read all about that in the book. I don't want to go into that right now, but we needed to keep our relationship not student-teacher at that point, but you can get all the details in the book. Because I want to stick to this point, which is that through the students working, we did a lot of life practice. And then there'd be moments in the middle of the day that we would stop, and I would just witness the work. I wouldn't involve myself in it, but I would witness. I would be in those groups at times. Sometimes I wasn't. But he began to notice that working on an issue, whatever the experience was in someone, if you took a certain issue, it would lead to a very similar kind of resolution that we had. And at first, of course, people were dealing with lots of psychological material that we do. Some people are saying, wow, this is the best therapy in town. And Hamid would just go, just wait. And then what started to happen was a real drilling in when people would feel like they got to some resolution and understanding of some pain or reactivity they were having, and feeling, okay, I understand. I'm having an insight now. I feel good. You'd say, what kind of good? What do you mean good? What does good feel like? And that would begin the process of dipping in further to what is good. Sometimes it was, I just feel opened up, like that's all gone. Where did it go? Well, I don't know. But it's gone. Isn't that good enough? And he'd say, well, what is that? So we got more and more into it, but then people would start dipping in deeper and having the experience of presence, which many of you have been taught that presence is the self-knowing existence that knows its own existence, but isn't a self-reflective knowing. That's the palpable sense of I am. And for us, that comes in many qualities. But for Hamid, he began to see the patterns, and we began to talk about the fact that this would lead to a certain aspect. This issue, this category of issues would lead to a certain aspect. It was being verified, not by just our experience, but by many people's experiences. But the question still remained. I know this is true. I know this is the truth. I know these aspects are an expression of the truth. How can I know with absolute certainty? So I'm going to read you a little passage about what happened when he was pondering that question for many, many months, which I will need my glasses for, which are in my purse, I think. Just, thank you. Thank you. Perfect. We all need friends to help us on the journey. Okay. Hamid felt an urgency to find out how he could know unequivocally that what he felt without a doubt to be true was actually the truth. Hotline. Please turn your phones off. No one can dispute this felt sense of certainty in the heart that is in every human being and that knows the naked truth and resonates when truth is expressed, discovered, or revealed. But where does that level of certainty come from? Inference? Intuition? Logic? All of these. But that was not satisfactory for Hamid. He had to be certain. What is the irreducible feeling of truth that we feel in our being? Many people are familiar with the basic sense in the heart of knowing that something is true or false, but what is the source of that capacity? He wasn't ever satisfied with just, it feels right. He had to know it by feeling it. Hamid had followed his truth sense for years, but now the understanding arrived. In the midst of his exploration into the question of truth, a golden diamond vehicle made itself known to him. The vehicles, if you're not familiar with those in our work, have to do with kind of like messengers from the invisible that speak a truth. But like an angel for Christianity or deities for Buddhism, ours are vehicles made of the very substance of presence itself that we can know as what we are. So they don't remain other. They're actually substances that show up and unwind us in certain ways from the inside that evoke our own knowledge and wisdom of what we are. That might have been the fastest diamond vehicle teaching I ever gave. But there's more detail in here. In the midst, let's see, we got to the golden diamond, made itself known to him. It was a very similar one to other diamonds that had come before. Diamonds have to do with knowledge in our work. It was a diamond made of solid gold and light as one presence, which invoked the felt sense of truth itself as an objective presence. Hamid already had experienced presence as strength, love, compassion, clarity, and so on. And he knew that presence was the source of all these affects that we innately feel or that are obvious to us as part of our usual knowledge. Now the golden diamond made it evident that presence was not an idea of the truth, but rather the truth itself, the truth of existence. The unmistakable ringing in the heart, yes, this is true, has its roots in the ground of being itself. So one of the first things that we try to teach in this work, or we attempt to convey, is the teaching of a teacher is important. That vessel will display the teaching. The more it's embodied, the more it will display itself through them. You can get transmission. However, you have to verify it yourself. Do not believe me. Do not take what I say to be true. Believe your own heart, follow it in, and find that truth within you until you can say, I know the truth. And that can lead you to, I not only know the truth, but that truth is me. It is not other. It is not somebody else's truth. It's me. And that's another reason I wrote this book, but I didn't know that until after I wrote it. I didn't know all the reasons, like I said at the very beginning. But what I have found out is the same force that was pushing the teaching into the world is the same one that pushed an unsuspecting instrument to write this one. But what happens when you find that truth in you? What happens when you actually don't even get that far? What happens if you know you're not being completely truthful with somebody when you know you need to be? And you finally are, and you struggle with it. Oh God, I've got something really difficult to tell them. I don't think I can do it. It's way too difficult. Or I don't want to see some truth about myself. But when you finally turn and face it and feel it, even if it's painful and difficult, or you've said that difficult thing to your wife or your husband or your partner, your kid, your aunt, whatever, or did that difficult thing, or when you finally turned in and you felt the pain of something that you knew was there, doesn't it feel better? When you quit fighting, when you quit saying, I'm not going there. I'm not going to do that to myself. I'm not going to face that head on. That is just not good. Because it's going to hurt, or it's going to be not nice, or it's going to be, what if I lose that relationship if I say that? Well, if you're not truthful in a relationship, you're going to lose it anyway. Right? Because that untruth is going to just be the stepping stone to the next one, and the next one, and then you're going to have to protect them from this one and then that one, and pretty soon you're protecting them from you. Then what have you got? A relationship where you've got no relationship. Because there's no truth anymore. Some people might be satisfied with that. Oh, let's not talk about that. We've all had those kind of relationships. Oh, brother, she's bothering, man, I can't. But I'll hurt her feelings if I say, I'm feeling reactive. But once you sit down and say, okay, I'm having a reaction and I don't know how much it's me and I don't know how much it is that you're stimulating something in me, or that what you want to say is that you're actually like that. But you try not to, no attacking, but you actually get the truth out and you start to feel relieved. We're actually talking about this. That truth, that warmth of that truth diamond started another journey through the heart of bringing in all kinds of different teachings about truth not being the painful thing we think of it as. That actually it feels good. And then not only does it feel good at some point, when you hit that feeling in yourself of really knowing, I am that truth, and that feels really good, you start to feel like your heart is celebrating, like, yes, I've waited so long for this to happen. You feel joyous. You feel goodness. But then you can start to feel like a sweetness emerges. It's like your mind gets taken into the heart in a way that you get to stop, look around, and get into the blissfulness, but not just get into it and feel it and melt, but actually know it in all of its glorious display. It's a fabulous, ecstatic, wonderful feeling. And that's really, for some of you who know the teaching of the Merkaba, teaches us that pleasure and truth are one and the same. And it goes against our ideas about truth being a mental truth based on facts, verifying things in terms of our minds, or based on somebody else's idea. I mean, if you really think about science, a lot of it is belief, because we trust the people who found the things. Have you ever seen a molecule? Then how do you know they exist? It's faith. You have faith in these guys that they're telling you the truth, that they know how to do it, and they collaborate with one another. They see the patterns. So at first there was like atoms, and then they realized atoms had a whole bunch of other stuff in them. And it's all verified there, but we're letting them do the work, and we have faith in them. So for most of us, science is a religion. Right? We just have faith in the fact that these guys know what they're doing. The thing is, inner verification is easier for us because we know when it's right on, because you feel it. So that delight that comes with knowing is a substantial delight. It's not just, oh boy, I feel good now. No, it's, oh my God. It's knowing that I'm the truth, and that truth feels really good. But you know what? It doesn't feel good. Its very nature is goodness and pleasure and bliss. But it's the palpable feeling and knowing of that sweetness and celebration. So even happiness was something we probed into. Usually when you get happy, it's like, okay, why probe that? You'll wreck it. In fact, sometimes my students were investigating, a very long time ago, not so much anymore. My students are much more smarter than to bring that to me at this point. Why probe happiness? But when you probe anything, it brings out its reality more clearly. If it's false, it will expose the falseness. If you're really happy and you go into that feeling, you begin to feel the actual origin of happiness, which is the sun in your heart that makes you feel like you are that radiance. And it's spontaneous and wonderful. And nobody has to tell you different. You can feel its radiance. You feel the glow. You feel that palpable sense of it. So we don't have to be scared of probing anything. When you actually have heart and mind working together, it's a gentle spirit that just says, oh, let's just see. Let's just see what's under that rock. The curiosity and innocence begins to get more and more part of the search. And that innocence is the wonder of everything that is. Everything and anything. And I'd love to hear your questions because I feel them bubbling. But what I would love to do is read a passage that just shows the process a little bit of how something happened for me that was extremely painful and what I learned. And it was a short passage, but it was something that I think really exemplifies our work, our approach, our attitude, and it can be helpful. And one of the things you'll find when you read this book is there's one particular character that threads through the entire thing. Has anybody read the book yet? Who was it that threaded through the whole thing? My doggie. My dog, Mushka. She was a delight, and it's the only four-legged that Hamid ever took to. Kuwaitis don't think much about pets, especially dogs, but actually, he did have a bird as a pet, and you'll read about that too. And he said, well, Mushka's not a pet. He said, she's just like Logos, my bird. I said, well, what's that? He goes, one of the family. But anyway, Mushka. I had left my first husband, and that was very difficult for me. It was a very charmed life. It was everything I had ever hoped and never thought I could have. A handsome young man, a doctor, well-educated, brilliant, really. He was just beginning his life. He had a promising future. And I left for various reasons. It just wasn't the right thing. It wasn't like our marriage was terrible, but I had to go. So one morning I woke up from the little apartment that I had rented. My dog was there, and I looked at her, but I just kind of spoke out into the room. Alone again, I sighed. My voice sounded damp and low. The white fluff near me was sweet company, but the white fluff was her. She was white. She was a Samoyed. I didn't always mind living alone, and I looked at her and I thought, well, mostly alone. But there were times like this morning when I felt an emptiness filling with unhappiness. I wanted a lover. Human comfort. I wanted intimacy. Thanks, girl. I love you too. I was looking at her and feeling our companionship. I wandered through the billowing fog of ideas, hopes and desires, and sifted through my sensations. Some tension at my sternum and the left side of my diaphragm drew my attention. And I breathed into the area. Yearning swelled, then crested in the center of my chest. Tears spilled out of my eyes. I suspended my ideas of what would quell the pain and simply felt the yearning. The sadness felt heavy at first, but as I let go into it, I felt the release of pressure. The tears pulled in my ears and flowed down in delicate, salty trails to the pillow. The emptiness grew, and I wailed and moaned in primitive, unrecognizable sounds. The release relaxed my body into a deepening quiet, and a softness filled my heart. Warm, green compassion soothed my aching being. Then I felt my heart flowering from the center of itself, rooted in silence. A quiet, black, velvety space opened and invited me into its depth. Nourishing nectars streamed, melting me into a simple solitude. I continued to soften as the space around me deepened with richness. I was touched in an exquisite way beyond the spacious darkness inside every cell of my being. I realized I had always thought of intimacy as a romantic encounter, a candlelight and roses kind of thing, and, most important, staring into someone else's eyes. This new sweet interiority made it apparent how being in love was the very essence of intimacy. In the middle of my chest, every kind of love arose as different essential aspects: will, strength, kindness, brilliance, even power existed in my heart as diamond love. Each gem was rounded in the middle with a pearly fullness. It was remarkably impersonal, yet personal at the same time. The pregnant love diamonds in the black expanse revealed that this structure was the treasure of my own true heart. For those of you who don't know about the pearliness in our work, it represents the true individual, not the individual of ego that's separated, but a true individual of fullness, uniqueness, and presence. I felt rich, whole, and beautiful. The longing to find another person to complete me evaporated. I had found an intimacy and love of incomparable grace. My heart was so smart. I got up off the futon and floated to the back door to let Mushka out for her morning rounds through the neighborhood. Inhaling a deep breath of fresh air, I found the freedom of movement in my ribs and torso, a sensual pleasure. I drank in the sounds of the birds with their lively banter, the scolding squirrels scurrying through the thistles. The world was vibrant and alive, and I felt in personal contact with it all. Weightless, flying free like the sparrows, I began my day's activities. As I made my way over to Hamid that afternoon for our daily check-in, I was still feeling the deep intimacy of loving space and plump diamonds. It seemed to take a sweet eternity to get to his house. Hamid met me at the door. I was touched by the immediacy of our interaction. I felt deep personal appreciation for him, the man, the friend, the teacher, in all his unique preciousness. I saw that my heart had never faltered. I was just afraid sometimes. I felt the steadfastness of my commitment to truth and how it had always been a driving force in my life. So I was appreciating myself too. We went to the den, and I told him the story of how my heart had become a diamond portal of love. Tranquil gladness filled his eyes as I spoke. I felt his appreciation for the truth of what I was. He didn't have to say a word. A new level of our friendship was opening, even more real and human. I saw our personal differences as the interesting, distinctive qualities of what we each were. This personal intimacy and our love for the truth was the essence of our relationship. The rest was peripheral. And me? I felt deep appreciation for myself as well as for Hamid. I felt the simple, open truth of a woman inseparable from being. There was no little girl to be found, for she had dissolved into my heart. The sweet, innocent love qualities she held within her small frame had become part of me. I was contented with my aloneness as I sat in profound, intimate contact with my friend. "Would you like some tea?" Hamid asked. He looked royal. I paused to feel the rich simplicity in the atmosphere. Sure. Any questions? I think it's a good time for them. Let's start with you and then you. I couldn't decide. Yes. I thought, okay, let's start. Yes, right here. I forgot already. Yes.
Hi, Karen. My name's Dorius, and I'm been a student in the school for a few years now. Firstly, I just want to thank you so much for your book. It really answered a longing that I had, and I grabbed it and I devoured it, I don't know, in a few days, and so much so really I need to read it again, because unfortunately the age I am now, I seem to forget quite a lot, so I would like to read it again. Yes,
I get something else every time I read it too.
I've kind of got two questions really, and they're not frivolous, but they might sound it. One is to do with they're both really to do with a name. One is a diamond approach.
It would help if I could see your mouth.
Is that better?
Down.
Down. Okay.
There
sorry.
we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The diamond approach, I've been a student now in the school for 9 years, and it just occurred to me recently, this is just the first part of the question, that I've actually never seen any diamonds, I've never seen any jewels, and...
yes, the inner jewelry. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, and I'm not saying I don't believe in their existence, but
you shouldn't.
Just kind of amusing in a way.
Yeah.
There's something makes me come back, so...
That's a great question,
so
and it's
presence.
not frivolous at all.
So the second question is also relates to the
Can
name.
I answer the first one first? Many people in this work do not experience presence in that way. Have you ever experienced presence?
Absolutely, yeah.
Does it feel absolutely? So that's undoubtable.
Undoubtable.
That's enough.
Okay.
Follow it, love it, find out about it. That's enough. The diamonds are actually rare occurrences, I'm finding out. They were not for Hamid and I. They came rather quickly and easily, but I think partly that has to do with the teaching itself. There are many students who do feel diamonds. It's a form of presence, and it's a true structure. It's not a structured by mind kind of presence, but not everybody feels them. But if you know presence, have you experienced different qualities?
I have an access to certain qualities like silence, preciousness, stillness, isness, clarity. Those would be the ones that are most familiar to me.
Have you had a practice before you were in the diamond approach?
Yes, I actually learnt what used to be called TM, or transcendental meditation, many years ago. So for me, that was a way into pure awareness.
So that may have honed your soul in a particular way that helps silence, preciousness, the clarity.
Yeah.
That kind of experience come more easily. If you probe into the nature of those, that can open up new things. Or move into the personal realm as you're feeling that. Perhaps the personal realm is the area that you could explore more, and that might open up to the qualities more, because they're more relevant and accessible from the more personal side of things. But maybe not. You might be able to actually have those things elaborate.
What do you mean by the personal realm? I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Well, the people, being a person in the world. The stillness and the silence kind of takes you down underneath everything.
Right, yeah.
Being a person in the world and butting up against your friends and what happens in your relationships and feeling reactive and not doing your mantra to get beyond it. And if you stay in that reactivity and explore it and get precise about it and maybe allow the silence when it's coming, but you can kind of slow it down and feel into that reactivity. Like when you're angry, feel into the middle of that instead of slipping into the silence.
Okay, yeah.
So it's a kind of like a midway between, but that has a very important kind of realization in it. So it would be, I think for you, I'd want to bring in personal stuff and
Thank you.
wrestle with you.
So the other thing I want to wrestle with is the name Ridwan. Because, but my understanding is in this school they talk a lot about we're doing this because we just love truth. And I know I do have some love of truth, but I also know really I have a lot of love for I want to feel better. And my understanding is that Ridwan means comfort. So I kind of experience a kind of dialectic between this passion for truth that I'm supposed to have and just this longing, I just have to feel better. So that's it. That's my question. Am I here? Is it the Is it the love of truth school, or is it the feel better school, which is I think what
Is there a difference? I haven't noticed there's a difference. I always feel better when I'm in the truth. But it's a good question too. There's a part of us that really wants to feel better, but what you don't know yet is what I was giving you a 2-minute teaching on was the truth.
It was beautiful, thank you.
Is the pleasure. It is the biggest feel-good thing you ever want to feel in your entire life. You become a big, old, fat popsicle. Creamy in the middle, that vanilla that's just melting and around dribbling, and around the outside is that tangerine glistening, and you bite into it and you get that tangy thing, and then you get that melting sloppy stuff. It just
I kind of want to, is this true, Hamid?
Feel me, honey. It feels good.
Is it true, Dad?
So, there you have it.
Thank you.
That's a very clean demonstration of the fact that that pleasure knows no bounds.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes. Actually, can I ask you one question? Where did you learn about Ridwan being comfort?
Someone said it's Arabic, Ridwan or something.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to just say a little bit about Ridwan first, which is that it has to do with contenting, contentment, and it's all the contenting things all wrapped into one. And I forget what the name of it's a verb or a noun. What is it? A verbal noun. Anyway. I can't remember it either. But the point is that when you feel that, when you know what Ridwan is, actually Ridwan is the angel at the gates of heaven. And it has pink gold in a beautiful blend of an apricot. And that's really a fulfilling, contenting, and it brings happiness in being happy for others. Blooming, growing, that makes you happy when they're content. You can't help when you feel it to want to make others happy. So I think you need to read the book again and settle in on Ridwan a little bit. I explained that in there. So, yeah, you'll get it on your second go around. Yes.
Can you please stand up for the camera?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm Michael. So thank you so much for the book. What I got out of it was very validating. How experimental and how open-minded both you and Hamid were, like in Berkeley and also in Boulder, like exploring new therapies, visiting with different teachers, and I'm a bit of a dabbler myself, so it was really great to find out
I
that...
need you to put this up close.
Oh, okay, that
There
you
you
were also dabbling in your search as well. And what I was curious about was trying to, I guess, get from you, like, at one point during your search, did you actually have any conscious recognition of what was happening, or, you know, like where your flame was taking you? And also, did you know that the teaching was coming through you, or did you have any idea back then or looking back?
Nope. I mean, we got to a point where we realized a teaching was happening, but we never knew where it was headed. We only knew where we had been. We still don't know where we're headed. Really. It keeps elaborating itself, bringing more different kinds of experiences. So for me, there's no end to it, which is part of the beauty of this path that also is quite different from many other traditions. There isn't an end point to it. But yes, there was a point at which also there was a recognition after we saw that people were being imbued with the presence also, and that the issues were becoming really obviously universal issues for people. And then that would dip into greater expanse. I mean, much of what I read you and have talked to you about today really is the first turning. When I read the last bit is really when the first turning begins to move into that depth of our nature and go into boundlessness. But even the boundlessness, when we got into that, we realized that, well, by the time we got into boundlessness, we had realized that a teaching was happening. And I think the teaching, the recognition of that came around 1980 or 82 or something. This is a teaching. This is a bona fide teaching in its own path. It has its own rhythm. It has its own logos. It's the way it's displaying itself. It's different than anything else. This is not a synthesis. Because any time we'd go to a teacher, something would happen to us, but it wouldn't necessarily be what was happening to them. Or if it was, it would come through us and then be displayed in a very different way with a different understanding. The way we talk about the absolute is different than the first absolute experience I ever had with somebody. That was a very different tradition. So our logos has a certain understanding of the dimensions. Most traditions don't have those dimensions. There may be more of them, for all I know. But we also recognize when we hit the end of the absolute, it shuttled us right into another realm, beyond dual and non-dual. And that opened up a whole nother exploration. And then we thought we had left the teaching. We thought, okay, we're done with that teaching. This is something else. We don't know what this is. And so we just kept exploring, and then the pieces fell together, and now the fourth turning and the third turning are part of the teaching. We have now 4 turnings. So I guess that's the long answer to, yes, we knew at some point that it was a teaching in its own right, because it had its own principles. It had its own organization, and it came about that way. We didn't try to make it that way.
And during that time, did you ever feel, or did you recognize that it wasn't you? Or that was it you?
We never thought it was us.
Yeah.
In fact, Hamid still never takes any credit for it, and I certainly don't. And the one that you see is not the one who it's coming through or from. It's never the person. It's far more brilliant and beautiful and majestic and fabulous than any one person can be. It is our nature that is arising. We are the instruments of this particular teaching, but it isn't to our credit. So when we realized that we were an instrument for this, it brought in a greater level of responsibility in how do we protect it and provide access to it. So our interest is not in recruiting people, it's in displaying it and then letting people feel, is this right for me? Does this fit? Is this something that resonates? And the work takes care of itself that way. It got to Europe not because we decided it was a good idea, but because people had read the books and said, please come. And we came for one meeting of 40 people, and they said, please come back, and we came back. They say, well, would you come again? Okay, so we came, and then we said, okay, this is like, this is a pattern. How about if we just keep coming? So we did. So it's been like that. It's been very organic, and then at some point there's a recognition, oh, there's a group here. Let's just do it. And that was a huge experiment. We thought, oh, no private sessions, no small groups. I don't know if that could work with what we want to do. So that was an experiment, and it turned out to work quite nicely, as you all can attest to, or many of you. Thank you. Yes?
I'm curious about, you talked to this
I need you to...
Yeah, okay. Hi.
Thank you.
Yeah, so make contact with you. I'm curious, you said to the gentleman here that the transcendental meditation honed his soul in a particular way. You talked about Hamid and him entering through the doorway of physics. So I'm curious about what honed your soul to be so open and spacious and curious and probing.
Well, I'd like to back up a little bit. What I meant when I was talking to the gentleman was that it's possible that through a certain kind of practice that will develop a kind of trough the soul's able to go down easily.
Okay.
That isn't true for everyone. I work with Buddhists, I work with Sufis, and there is a certain flavor there, but they can maybe ease into the work and the qualities and so on, and not just go down the way the Sufi path is. But I think once you have a realization and you settle in it and have that as a focus for a long time, it becomes something that you easily go to, and sometimes you have to kind of set your sights a little differently in what you're going into, what you're probing into, what you value. And Hamid didn't really enter the door of inner work through physics. Seeing that physics wasn't going to do it for him is what helped him move away from physics. During that time, he was actually working with a gentleman, Claudio Naranjo, as you will read about in the book. And that's actually how I met. And one of the beautiful things for me in knowing Sandra is not just in who she is and the teacher she's become and how lovely that is, but also she and I were roommates in college. And I met Hamid through her because she was in that group too. There was a bunch of people that I still know who were in that group. But he came to pick her up one night and plunked his way down the hallway, and I thought, I wonder what that is. And he popped through the doorway, and there he was. So I was introduced to him. But he had done a lot of work. He was involved in Reichian therapy and all kinds of body work and therapies and all kinds of things that really opened up and sensitized his body and so on. So I'd say his doorway was more in being intrigued than into the inner world and finding people who would teach him.
Right.
So for me, let's see, now we're back to me, aren't we? When I was about 15, I moved back in with my mother. My parents had separated, and she lived with a gentleman who became what I call the father of my soul. And without him, I would not be here. He helped me in so many ways. I, at the time, had very little self-esteem. I was very uncomfortable with people. I was extremely shy. And I think that was largely due to the fact that I felt I had nothing to contribute and nothing to say. But he got me talking, and talking about what was true for me, and listening. And he encouraged me to say anything. And we began with a difficult relationship, and then I ended up trusting him and feeling like this was a man I could talk to. And we began to have a conversation, and he saved my life.
That sounds amazing.
Thank you, Russ, wherever you are.
I find that very, very touching.
Yeah, he was a good man and a good parent to me. And actually, Hamid also knew him. And he came to Boulder when we lived there, and he flew an airplane and would take Hamid and Sandra up flying. And I said, no, thank you very much. I'll stay on the ground. I was scared of flying at the time. But he was a very good man and actually escorted me into realms. He had a friend who did yoga, so he got me a yoga book and had me go to yoga classes with this friend. And actually, he bought me a VW bug when I was 16 because he thought it would help draw people to me to get rides to school. And I began to have friends. And then I began to have really good friends and kicked out the ones who just wanted a ride to school. And he helped me do that. He said, no. They don't just get the ride. If they're not going to be willing to talk with you and sit and have lunch with you, you don't have to do that. Oh, okay. No, you don't know. I have other friends who are having the ride today, thank you. But he just helped me in so many ways.
Yeah. I'm really impacted at how the truth saved you by, somebody facilitating that and supporting you. And I suppose as a parent as well, I'm very struck by what you're saying.
Yeah, my mother supported me too. My mother was an unusual woman. Actually, she was Hamid's student.
Wow.
Also. At some point, she did a lot of Sufi work and some other things. She did a lot of work at Esalen with Fritz Perls, and
Yeah, yeah.
she got very interested. She was an artist. That's why I have lots of nice outer jewelry. She made a lot of beautiful things. But so she worked on herself, which also had her leaving my father. So I had that as a model, which wrecked my life, and then he helped me rebuild it. So I did have a lot of blessings, but I was always interested in that which lay beyond.
Right.
I was always kind of fascinated by mysterious things that couldn't be explained. And the invisible world always felt close to me. And Sandra actually was one of my very first, I considered, spiritual friends, who Russ also became somewhat of a father figure for her too. And kind of we did self-hypnosis kinds of things. And he had given me the book of Yogananda when I was for my 16th birthday, and I just ate it up, and then I gave that to Sandra. And she liked it, so yeah,
Thank you.
I was lucky.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. It's very personal. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of what the book is about, is sharing my personal, my human difficulties, but also that those can be probed and resolved. And I bring in some very, very difficult times about when my father and mother split up. It was a horrendous thing, and I write a little bit about that. But what I really wanted to give you, actually, in writing the book, I realized that I was giving you me. This book truly is me in all of its variations. And it shows you don't have to be a deity to be on a spiritual path. And that isn't what your goal has to be. And as a teacher now of this path and an embodiment of this path, it shows what it takes for that to occur. But it also shows that you start out as a regular person in the world, rubbing up against life, getting hurt, falling down, having essence come through you, falling down a little softer, but falling down, or bumping into stuff, or feeling pain. Life is painful. It's not like, oh, when am I going to get over that? It's no, how am I going to learn to handle it? And what do I do with it when I encounter it? I still do. And I want to know what it means. What is it telling me? Read yourself like a book. Open yourself up and just start reading. If you read a book that's only got good stuff in it, you don't feel like it's true. If you're on an adventure, half of the time what you talk about later is the flat tire you got and how that led you to this person who helped you fix it. And then you sat around drinking tequila all night and it turned into this fabulous party. And you had no idea. If that flat tire hadn't happened, you wouldn't have ended up. And now you're like best buddies forever and you go to South Africa to visit them all the time. I mean, do you know what I mean? It's like a real adventure is not just flying into bliss. A real adventure has all kinds of twists and turns, stuff you don't expect, stuff you don't like, and then you realize that you do. And then stuff that you do that you realize isn't you anymore. And it's all part of it. It's all part of it. So it's really how we approach ourselves. The diamond approach is a very precise, scintillating, clarifying approach to any experience. Not because it's going to end up letting you walk through that door into bliss, but because you'll learn, you'll grow, you'll see something you've never seen before. And that will add to the wonder. And you'll get more and more transparent until the one who set foot on that journey disappears. And there's just the journey that continues. And occasionally, you'll step back through that threshold, and there'll be vestiges that come forward as you meet new situations, and new things are pulled out of you and come to the fore. You might feel things you haven't felt in years, like, I thought I got over this. And then you go, well, wait a minute. What's pushing it now? What do I have yet to see? There's nothing to get over. Actually, one of my famous quotes that my students like is, if it's in the way, it is the way. And I just saw that somebody wrote a book with that title. I haven't read it, but anyway. I thought, what a good name for the title of a book. Maybe I should ask for a percentage. But anyway, any more questions? Yes? I guess I should sign books pretty soon. Yes?
I'm Jenny.
Hi.
Hi. One of the phrases that we've mentioned a lot this evening is the truth. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if you would speak a bit to the truth, because my understanding is there is no one truth. Mm-hmm. We each have our own, and I'd just like to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, I wondered how that was going to be to read something that had that in it and then to talk about that. That's a really good point, because when we hear about the truth or love for the truth, at first it really just doesn't make sense. And at first what we're doing is we're looking at what is true about what we encounter in ourselves. And what we're starting with is a person with history, all kinds of things that are difficult, and we want to unearth that truth. And we learn ways to be with it. We learn ways to open that up, be kind. It's a very self-respecting path, really. It's any experience. And as we get in touch more and more with that truth and move through it, like I was describing earlier, we get to a kind of resolution to some of those painful difficulties. And we use those situations and painful issues to discover that there is a bubbling up of something much richer and more substantial that we can come in contact with. And that truth then has the sense of, this feels true, with a undoubtable sense of truth beyond your subjective sense of that person who started probing and going into that difficulty. So that would be another level of truth that we encounter that feels like an essential kind of truth. And that essential kind of truth we begin to realize is something that everyone can have access to. And that everyone has access to that bubbling well of being. And then we recognize, as if we follow that stream to the ocean, and we realize that is just an aspect of this gigantic ocean of being. The origin of truth, the ground of truth. And then we realize that truth has yet another and another and another ground until we can feel ourselves beyond the ground of the ground and feel that we then find a truth that's really nothing. And that's the truth, that I'm nothing. But you see, following the truth is following that truth sense that continues to take you further and further into that core of truth and the ground of truth, and beyond those truths to an even greater truth. But all of those truths have meaning and import and value. So when you find that ocean of being, it doesn't discount the fact that that painful truth led you to that. It still remains as that happened in my history. But you can look back at it, at that truth from another place, and see that, oh, that isn't the most fundamental truth I know. I can see that from such a bigger place. Does that make sense?
Thank you very much.
Yes. How are we doing on time? Okay.
So this is 5 minutes for me. I'm Nisha. I'm from India. I'm doing these Ridwan things in a completely different culture, different language, finding hard. My training was how to play a good role of good daughter-in-law, mother-in-law. And I thought I have been playing this role very well.
In the school or just in your life?
My real world,
in the real
my
world.
world.
Now that's a whole
My world.
that's a whole conversation. We'll have that some other time. Yeah. So in your life, you play the good girl.
Yes. So what time I know when I go home, it is just go back to that pattern, become a grandmother again, eating my chapati and dal. There isn't any Western culture. So I'm finding this doing this Ridwan in Western culture, in English, and it seems like it is a real work. Of course, I love doing this work.
You love the English world, you said?
I love this Ridwan works.
I'm not understanding that. She loves the Ridwan work. Okay, got it.
So this is another thing, yeah.
What do you love about it?
Love about because I have been never asked as being a daughter, third daughter in the family. I have been never asked what I wanted. And that's why I don't know what I wanted. I haven't been taught. Mm-hmm. My training wasn't what I wanted.
Well, what do you want?
Always what other wanted, and
yeah.
to play that things by my parents, my society, my culture, my books. And I read all these books, how to become, how to play that good role.
So what do you want?
What I want
right now?
Right now, I want to find out more. Mm-hmm. It's not a question, but it is find out more about what really wanted, what was my heart desire, because I don't know what I wanted as a child.
So what does your heart desire right now? Can you feel that heart desire at this moment?
My heart desire is to find out really what I want.
What do you feel in your heart when you say that to me?
Don't know. That's the work I'm doing.
Tell me the sensation that's happening in your chest. Take a breath.
Just like to be in my body.
Like what?
I like to be in my body.
What do you feel in your body?
I would like to be really balancing. Don't know.
Let yourself not know. And just feel how much you want that.
I want so much. I want to find out so much about me.
I didn't hear you.
I want to find out what is me.
You can find out what this means. But you have to allow yourself to feel how much you want it and not try to figure it out. Feel, I want to know. There's some energy to that. That is the butter in the butter lamp. The fuel.
So there are so many this Ridwan concept and terminology I find difficult.
Well, the important thing is just to feel it. Do you have a private teacher?
I'm going to have one from...
That will help a great deal.
Though I have got my psychotherapist.
That will not help a great deal.
So that I didn't get, why people are laughing.
Let me qualify that. What it will help you do is to find your voice, to give you the supports you didn't have in your life. It'll help you come to that and get you to that threshold and be able to have the confidence to speak it. That it can help you do. Actually, I don't know a lot about how psychotherapy is done here, so I may be full of baloney. But the flame that you're talking about is of a spiritual nature, to know what I want. But there may be all kinds of stuff before that that you want, that isn't just turning inward. There might be actually things in your life that you need to assert yourself and speak out for. Therapy can help you do that. But what I'm seeing at the root of all of those desires is something that wants to know itself. So that therapy can help you move into the world in a more confident way, to not have to be such a good girl, deal with that superego kinds of thing. That's a good support. So I'm not saying stop that. But then on the other side, you might have somebody who would be able to help you navigate the rest of it. But I don't know. It's good to talk to somebody who knows you better than I do.
Thank you.
But those external supports are very, very important. So that's the therapy talk. Been useful. At one point in my work with getting involved with Essence, I felt quite a bit of it moving through me. And at some point I realized I needed to be in therapy. I was also being trained as a psychotherapist, so I had to get into therapy, but I chose somebody because I also knew there were things I couldn't get through with my friendship with Hamid. So I have nothing against therapy. Very useful, and that was a very important time for me. Use that way, but don't expect it to answer the inner question. But navigate both. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yes. One more.
Hi, Karen.
Hello.
My interest was about the difference you find between teaching in the States and teaching in Europe, and I guess how that's actually developed between the two sort of continents as well, because I found that reading your book, I'm getting through it the second time, was that I had a lot of envy about how the first students seemed to develop so rapidly, that sort of rapid acceleration. And also the amount of support that they got in the small groups and the private sessions and so on. And it's obviously different over here. And in the particular group that I'm with, we're just down to one retreat a year now. So it's sort of, when I look at what's happening in Berkeley in particular, I want to live over there. I want to spend my time there, or I want access to that teaching.
Come on over. No. Actually, what you're bringing up is a big thing. Sometimes it always looks that way on the other side. In every group, I see some people develop quickly and some people not so much. And that's okay. Everybody has their own pace. And the first groups of students seemed maybe from the book to develop fast, but there were also many students who dropped away, who left, who aren't in the school anymore. The ones that stayed, that's what you're seeing as teachers and very, very important vessels for the work. But there were certainly plenty that just didn't get it and didn't do it. And there were also many students who were having very easy experiences into presence. And we didn't understand at that time that some of those people were having easy experiences. They were not becoming realized. And there's a very, very big difference. And so even in Hamid's journals, I kept running across, I need to keep pinpointing and the fact that these experiences are not what they need to get caught up on. They need to stay with the truth and not just get engaged with the wonders of how good it feels. So there was a lot we learned about people slipping into experiences. Someone who takes a slow and steady path and really gets it actually is something that's very respectable. So the quick and easy is not always the best, or not always the most important or the most valuable. But having said that, there is also something about the way the very first groups were run, and this was way before the way things are done in Berkeley now, but when the first groups were running in Colorado, Hamid had them all weekend from Friday through Sunday, and you had to come. It wasn't, oh, my daughter is sick, or my this, or no. You find someone to take care of them, and you come. That's just what you do. Unless they were really so ill, they needed their mother, or they needed this, and that. There were moments of acquiescing to it, but he expected you to be there. Christmas, he used to have groups on Christmas. He didn't care. They said, well, I'm going to church. He said, this is your spiritual path. I expect you here. That got a little more lax over time and lots of rebellion. But if you have 20 people in a group, they were warriors for the truth. And that's what does it. If you really want to expand, if you really want that realization because you know that's who you are, be a warrior. Do everything impeccably. Every day, meditate. Every day, sense yourself. Go to every single meeting, even if you've had the teaching before. And you will find it. So that's the attitude needed, and that's what Hamid did at the beginning. He instilled it in people because he made it a rule. And they weren't even getting teachings. They were working on somebody's house. And then he would stop them every once in a while, and they'd do small group, work on their presence. He'd give them practices, and they'd do small group work and start to dip into essence. He wasn't teaching essence yet. We were still experimenting. If you really move into presence, what do you find? If you move into an issue with presence, what do you find? So it was a stalwart thing, but if you have that attitude, and that's what I was trying to convey in that book, is if you have that attitude, you will eat us up and swallow us and get everything you wanted. It's available. It's there, but you have to apply yourself. So you will get as much as you can by applying yourself as stalwartly as possible. So pull out that sword and start slashing the cobwebs. That's what it takes. So all groups have their the ones that appear to be slow. But I'll tell you one thing, I've got a story about many students who appeared to be slow and have surprised the living daylights out of me in what they have become. And I feel humbled and bowing at their feet is how I feel. So, but you might want to look at that envy thing. That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Okay, one more. One more? Or do I need to stop? One more and then I'm being called to the other room.
Thank you. My name's Esther. I'm part of UK3. When you talked about how important it was for the head and the heart to be kind of working together, I felt kind of a sense of something being miles away from me, of that I feel those to be very separate.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if it's part of an early wounding. I was adopted as very little, and I kind of feel there's a pattern in them operating separately. And I suppose I was looking for some advice in how to help them to get to know each other and work together.
Well, first of all, you're not alone. There's many people in this room that don't know that they've got a love affair possible here. That is that's part of what ego is it segments many different parts of ourselves. And what I was bringing in about the scientific mind and all of that, that's actually a very useful approach, but for inner work, we have to feel the love for this work, the love for the truth. Science tries to find the truth, but it stays very much as a dry and mental thing. For us, it needs to be lubed up with love. So when we lubricate the mind with love, lots of very interesting things can happen, and the mind really ends up needing to follow the heart wake, the wake of that rudder. But that doesn't happen immediately. It happens by using your mind to understand yourself and by letting yourself feel the desire to understand yourself. They really want to know. Just feeling the wish to know, being interested, being curious. That is that inkling. They're sending messages back and forth in the back. It's still a secret love affair. You're not aware of it yet. But just feeling that curiosity, that's the heart's effect on the mind.
Yeah, I feel my heart has a longing, but my head's a bit kind of fed up of trying to understand.
Yeah, so let your heart be the forerunner for a while. Because maybe you need to relax the mind a little bit and just go with your experience for a while. And with your intelligence, at some point, it'll be, oh, I get it, this and that, and oh, all right. But your teacher can help you to navigate what is a good emphasis for you that'll help those get online with each other. Trying too hard to figure out is really different from, I really want to know. You know the feeling? The difference?
I can hear it as you describe it.
Yeah, so wait until you feel, I really want to know. And your teacher knows you better than I do, but most people need help in letting the mind relax so that the heart can find its place. Because the heart often is just full of emotional kinds of things, emotional desires and reactions and things. So you're in the process of clarifying things for now, looking into things, reactions and stuff. So your mind's being used, even if you're not trying hard to figure it out, just by doing an exercise, you're using your mind. You're articulating things. You're articulating your experience. You're getting into it, feeling, oh, it feels tight over here. That's your mind helping you in your heart to feel the feeling. and your belly to feel the sensation. Oh, I'm sad. There's recognition, knowing. There's a sensation. So they're all really working together. You don't have to try.
Right. So there's a relief that actually
Yeah.
that's
You don't
enough
have to
for
try.
now.
Yeah.
I could be doing that.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, doke. Now I'm being called to the other room. Take care. Lovely to see you. Happy for you. Whoop.